Lebanon, Monastery of St. Maron, winter of 1898. The snow covers the mountains like a white shroud. Inside a cold, almost dark stone cell, a man is on his knees. His lips barely move. His hands, calloused from work and penance, hold a worn rosary. He hasn't eaten for days. He hasn't spoken for weeks. But tonight he breaks the silence. A young novice, trembling with cold and fear, kneels beside him. The monk, Charbel turns his face away. His eyes, deep as ancient wells, seem to see through time. And then he whispers, "A time will come when faith will be tested like gold in the fire. The east will bleed. The church will be divided from within. Many will abandon the altar. But those who remain, those who cross the dark night without letting go of God's hand, will see the dawn." The novice can barely breathe. He wants to ask more. But Charbel has already fallen silent again. 3 days later, he is dead. But the story was only just beginning. Cut to the present. It is now 2025. Lebanon is in ruins. Beirut, once called the Paris of the Middle East, is a ghost town, economically, politically, and spiritually shattered. Eastern Christianity, the kind that withstood empires, crusades, and Ottoman invasions, is on the verge of extinction. And on the other side of the world, in Rome, within the silent corridors of the Vatican, there are locked documents. There are letters that have never been fully revealed. There are testimonies from bishops and cardinals who visited the tomb of Saint Charbel and left transformed, or terrified, because Saint Charbel was not just a saint, he was a prophet. And his prophecies don't speak of a distant future. They speak of now, of you, of me, of 2025. If you want to understand how this prophecy can affect your life and your future, subscribe now and stay with me until the end of this video. Because what you are about to discover is not just history, it's a warning, it's a map. And perhaps, just perhaps, it's the last chance to understand what's happening before it's too late. Who was Charbel Makhlouf? Let me introduce you to this man. Youssef Antoun Makhlouf was born in 1828 in Beka Kafra, a remote village in the mountains of Lebanon. He was the youngest of 5 children. His father died when he was still a child. His mother remarried. Life was hard, poor, marked by work in the fields and deep faith, the faith of families who prayed the rosary at sunset, who lit candles before worn icons, who believed that God was closer in the mountains than in the cities. From childhood, Youssef has been different. He doesn't play like the other boys. He disappears for hours, climbs up to hidden caves on the hillsides, stays there alone, praying. His family finds it strange. Some neighbors say he is possessed. Others say he is a saint. At 23 years old, without telling anyone, he runs away from home. He walks for days until he reaches the monastery of Our Lady of Mayfouk. He knocks on the door, and when they ask his name, he replies, Charbel. It is the name of a martyr from Antioch in the 2nd century, a name that means story of God. And from that moment on, Youssef ceases to exist. Only Charbel exists, the man who chose to disappear so that God might appear. He was ordained a priest in 1859, but the life of a diocesan priest did not satisfy him. He wanted more solitude, more silence, more prayer. He asked to be transferred to the hermitage of Saints Peter and Paul in Anaya, a place even more isolated, even more brutal, even closer to God. And there he stays, for 23 years. Life in the hermitage, the man who chose the cross. Imagine that. A small stone room without heating, without comfort. A bed made of planks, a crucifix on the wall, a candle, nothing more. Charbel wakes up at 2 in the morning every day. He prays the liturgy of the hours alone, in Aramaic, the language of Christ. Then he spends hours in silent adoration before the Blessed Sacrament. He doesn't speak. He barely moves. But something happens there, something that witnesses describe as a palpable presence, as if heaven itself were bent over that small altar. He eats once a day, sometimes not even that. boiled potatoes, stale bread, water. He maintains this habit for months, until it breaks down. He works in the fields, chops wood, carries stones, as if his body were merely an instrument for atonement. And he suffers. Not only the physical suffering of fasting and cold, but also spiritual suffering. There are accounts that Charbel, in his later years, experienced nights of profound inner darkness, that dark night of the soul, that St. John of the Cross describes, where God seems absent, where faith is tested to the point of breaking. But he never gives up. And it is precisely in this total surrender, in this radical emptying of oneself, that something extraordinary begins to happen. People start looking for him, the miracles that no one could deny. Peasants, desperate mothers, terminally ill patients begin to climb the mountain to the hermitage. They don't ask for lengthy advice. They ask for prayer, and Charbel prays. And inexplicable things happen. A woman with paralysis in her legs stands up. A man blind from birth begins to see shadows. A child with a deadly fever wakes up in a cold sweat, but alive. Charbel never boasts. He never draws attention to himself. When someone thanks him, he nods and says in a low voice, "It wasn't me. It was him." But the superiors at the monastery are beginning to get nervous. They know Charbel is a saint, but they also know that holiness attracts attention, and attention attracts problems. Problems with Ottoman authorities, problems with radical Muslims who see Christians as infidels, problems with the church itself which fears uncontrolled mysticism. So they start hiding Charbel. They limit his visits. They try to protect him, or protect the institution. But you can't hide a light like that. The whispered prophecies, what Charbel saw. Now here's something few people know. Charbel, despite his silence, spoke. Rarely. But when he did speak, his words carried weight. And in the last years of his life, he began to do something that frightened even his fellow monks. He began to describe visions, not joyful visions of saints dancing in heaven. Dark visions, visions of wars, visions of betrayal within the church, visions of Christians being persecuted, driven from their lands, massacred. One of the monks closest to him, Father Elias, recorded this in a diary. He writes, "Father Charbel told me that he saw the East in flames. He saw churches desecrated. He saw priests fleeing. He saw the altar being abandoned. And then he wept. But afterwards, he said something I didn't understand at the time. Purification will come before peace. Many will fall, but those who remain will see the glory." Glory? What glory can come after so much suffering? Charbel didn't explain. He went back to being silent, a death that was not an end. On the night of December 16, 1898, during the celebration of Mass, Charbel suffered a stroke. He collapsed before the altar. He was carried back to his cell. For 8 days, he remained unconscious, unable to speak, unable to move. But witnesses say he was smiling, as if he were seeing something that others couldn't see. He died on December 24th, Christmas Eve. His body is buried quickly, without an elaborate coffin, without pompous ceremony. Just a simple habit, a simple grave, a simple prayer. Just as he lived. But 3 months later, something strange happens. The monks notice a light shining above their tomb at night. Not a candlelight. A light that seems to come from inside the earth. People in the village begin to see it too. They are frightened. They think it's a ghost or a demon. Until one of the monks says, "Let's open the tomb." And when they open, Charbel's body is intact, the incorrupt body, the first great sign. This shouldn't be possible. 3 months in the damp soil of Lebanon, no embalming, no preservatives, just earth, moisture, natural decomposition. But Charbel's body is supple, his skin is soft, his eyes closed, seem at peace. And even stranger, his body is sweating, not ordinary sweat, a clear, fragrant liquid that runs from his skin and soaks his clothes. The monks are paralyzed. One of them whispers, "It's oil, like the ancient martyrs." They rebury the body, but the light doesn't stop. The oil doesn't stop. People start coming from all over Lebanon. Muslims, Druze, Christians. Everyone wants to see, everyone wants to touch, and miracles begin to happen. A woman with terminal cancer is cured. A man paralyzed for 12 years gets up. A child born deaf begins to hear. The church is trying to control the situation, but it can't, because this isn't hysteria. This is verifiable. There are doctors. There are written testimonies. There is physical evidence. And then in 1950, the Vatican sent investigators. They exhumed the body again, 52 years after his death. And the body is still incorrupt. What they found and what they hid. This is where the story gets even stranger. During the 1950 exhumation, in addition to the incorrupt body, investigators found documents, letters, notes from priests who knew Charbel. And in these notes there are detailed descriptions of his prophecies. Prophecies that speak of a great apostasy within the church wars in the Middle East that would last for generations, the destruction of Lebanon as a Christian nation, a time of spiritual darkness where faith would be ridiculed, and finally, a painful purification followed by a new era of peace. But here's the problem. These prophecies were never fully revealed. Parts of them were published in official biographies. Parts of them were mentioned in canonization processes. But the complete content? Never. Why? Some say the Vatican was afraid of causing panic. Others say the prophecies were too ambiguous. But some say the prophecies were too specific, and that the Vatican didn't want to admit they were coming true. The first twist, the hidden date. Now comes the part that will make you rethink everything. In 1993, something extraordinary happened at the tomb of Saint Charbel. A woman named Nohad el-Shami, a Maronite Christian, is dying of cancer. She has already undergone every possible surgery. Doctors say there is nothing more they can do. She has, at most, weeks to live. Desperate, she asked to be taken to the tomb of Saint Charbel. Her family carries her there. She can barely stand. But she touches the cold marble of the tomb and prays. And then it happens. She feels a wave of heat run through her body, a sensation of absolute peace, and a voice not audible but internal, clear as crystal, that says, "You are healed." She goes home. 2 days later, the symptoms disappear. She returns to the hospital. The doctors perform new tests. The cancer is gone. Completely. No medical explanation. No trace of symptoms. No recurrence. The church investigates. Secular doctors investigate. They all confirm it's a miracle. And this miracle, officially recognized by the Vatican, was the key to Charbel's canonization in 1977. But here's the detail that nobody noticed. The date of the miracle of Noah was January 22nd, 1993. Why does this matter? Because January 22nd is the liturgical feast of Saint Vincent, a martyr of the early church. And in the Maronite tradition, Saint Vincent is the patron saint of who go through the fire and survive. Did Charbel choose this date? Did God choose it? Coincidence, or is it a sign, a prophetic clue, that the purification Charbel foresaw has already begun? So now tell me, why is a monk who died in 1898, whose body defies all laws of decomposition, whose prophecies speak precisely of the chaos we are experiencing now in 2025, still producing verifiable miracles? Why does the Vatican keep parts of its revelations locked away? And most importantly, what did Charbel see that we still don't understand? Because if the first parts of his prophecies came true, the apostasy, the wars, the destruction of the Christian East, then what he said about the finality will also come true. And the end is not destruction. It's a rebirth, but only for those who survive the dark night. And the dark night, my friend, has already begun. Anaya Monastery, Lebanon, 1950. A team of Vatican investigators stands around an open tomb. They've traveled from Rome with one mission, to examine the body of Charbel Makhlouf and determine, once and for all, whether the stories are true or merely pious exaggeration. They expect to find bones, dust, perhaps some fabric remnants. That's what 52 years in the ground should produce. Instead, they find this: a body that looks like it died yesterday. Dr. Georges Choukrala, a prominent physician from Beirut, is called to examine the corpse. He's a skeptic, a man of science, not superstition. He approaches the body with clinical detachment. He checks for signs of embalming. None. He examines the tissue. Flexible. He notes the color of the skin. Normal. Not the gray-green of decay. Not the leather-brown of mummification. He writes in his official report, "This preservation defies all known principles of forensic pathology. There is no natural explanation for what I am witnessing." But that's not even the strangest part. The body is still producing liquid, a clear, fragrant substance that seeps from the pores, soaking through the habit, pooling at the bottom of the casket. The investigators collect samples. They send them to laboratories in Rome, Paris, and Beirut. The results come back identical. Unknown organic composition. No bacteria, no fungus, no decay markers. One scientist writes in his notes, "This substance should not exist, but it does, and it's healing people. The miracles that doctors couldn't deny." Let me take you through the cases. Not the folklore, not the "my cousin's friend was healed" stories. I'm talking about documented, investigated, medically verified miracles. Case number 1, Sister Maria Abel Kamari, 1950. A Lebanese nun, diagnosed with terminal stomach cancer. 3 surgeons confirm, inoperable. Maximum life expectancy, 3 months. She makes a pilgrimage to Charbel's tomb. She prays. She touches the marble. That night, she dreams of an old monk in a tattered habit who touches her abdomen and says, "You will live." She wakes up. The pain is gone. She returns to the hospital. New x-rays, new examinations. The cancer has vanished. Her doctors write a joint statement. "We have no medical explanation for this complete and instantaneous remission." The Vatican investigates. Testimonies are collected. Medical records are verified. The miracle is officially recognized. Case number 2, Alessandro Obeid, 1993. A 13-year-old boy from Lebanon, born with a severe spinal deformity. Multiple surgeries failed. He's confined to a wheelchair, his spine twisted like a gnarled branch. His mother, desperate and exhausted, brings him to Anaya. She lays him before Charbel's tomb. She weeps. She begs. She has no more words left, only tears. And then Alessandro feels it. A burning sensation in his spine. Not painful, intense, like fire, but without heat. He tries to stand. His mother grabs him, terrified he'll fall. But he doesn't fall. He stands, straight, upright. They rush back to the hospital. The doctors take new images. They compare them to the old ones. They call in specialists. Everyone sees the same thing. The spine has straightened. Vertebrae that were fused and twisted are now aligned, perfectly. One orthopedic surgeon writes, "In 30 years of practice, I have never seen spontaneous correction of this severity. This is impossible." But it happened, and the proof is walking around Lebanon right now. Case number 3, Nohad El-Shami, the one that changed everything. I mentioned her briefly in the last chapter. But let me give you the full story now. Nohad is 55 years old in 1993. She has a rare and aggressive form of intestinal cancer. She's been operated on twice. The cancer keeps coming back. The 3rd surgery reveals that it has spread throughout her abdomen. The doctors close her up without removing anything. There's nothing left to remove. She's dying. They give her weeks. Her family takes her to Charbel's tomb. She can barely walk. She's emaciated, jaundiced, in constant pain. She kneels. She prays. And then she hears it. A voice. Not audible, not external, but undeniable. Clear as daylight. "You are healed." She doesn't feel different immediately, but she feels peace. A peace she hasn't felt in months. 2 days later, she wakes up hungry. For the first time in weeks, she wants to eat. The pain is gone. The jaundice is fading. She goes back to the hospital. Her doctors are stunned. They run tests, CT scans, blood work, exploratory examination. Nothing. No cancer. No lesions. No scar tissue where the tumors were. Dr. Adib Khoury, her oncologist, submits a formal statement. This patient was dying. There was no possibility of recovery. What occurred here is beyond the scope of medical science. The Vatican opens an official investigation. 15 medical experts review the case. All 15 agree, inexplicable, instantaneous, complete. On October 9, 1977, Pope Paul VI canonizes Charbel Makhlouf as a saint. Nohad's healing is cited as the definitive miracle. But here's what most people don't know. Nohad lived another 26 years. Cancer-free, healthy, active. She died in 2019 at age 83 of natural causes. And before she died, she gave an interview. A long, detailed interview, and in that interview she said something that didn't make it into the official Vatican documents. She said, "When I heard the voice at the tomb, it didn't just say I was healed, it said something else. It said, 'You are healed so you can bear witness to what is coming.'" What is coming? She wouldn't elaborate, or couldn't. She died 3 months after that interview. But the question remains, the persecution, why they wanted to silence him. Now here's where the story gets darker, because not everyone celebrated Charbel's miracles. Not everyone wanted them to be real. During his lifetime, Charbel faced opposition, not from secularists or atheists, from within the church itself. Why? Because mystics are dangerous. They don't follow scripts. They don't obey political calculations. They speak truth, even when truth is inconvenient. And Charbel's truth was this: the church was failing. He never said it loudly. He never wrote manifestos or gave public sermons. But in his private conversations, in his whispered warnings to fellow monks, he made it clear lukewarmness was spreading. Compromise was infecting the clergy. The faith was being watered down to avoid offending the powerful, and he prophesied that this would lead to disaster. Some bishops loved him for this. They saw him as a prophet calling the church back to holiness. But others feared him. They saw him as a threat, a loose cannon, a man who might say the wrong thing at the wrong time and bring persecution down on the entire Christian community in Lebanon. Remember, Lebanon in the 1800s was under Ottoman rule. Christians were tolerated, but barely. Any hint of rebellion, any accusation of proselytizing to Muslims could result in massacres. So the church hierarchy made a decision. Keep Charbel hidden. Restrict his contact with lay people. Don't publicize his miracles. Don't let him become a symbol that could provoke Ottoman authorities. They essentially buried him alive. But after his death, they couldn't control the story anymore. The miracles multiplied. The pilgrims came. The light over his tomb wouldn't stop shining. And then something even stranger happened. The second exhumation, what they found in 1952. 2 years after the 1950 exhumation, church authorities decide to move Charbel's body to a new location inside the monastery. They want to build a proper shrine. They want better access for pilgrims. But also, quietly, they want more control over the narrative. They open the tomb again. The body is still incorrupt, but this time they find something else. Tucked inside his habit, near his chest, is a small leather pouch. Inside the pouch are folded papers, handwritten notes. Not in Charbel's handwriting. His eyesight was too poor in his final years to write clearly. But in the handwriting of Father Makarios, one of the monks who attended him during his final illness. The notes are labeled, "Words of Far Charbel, December 1898. The church officials read them. Their faces go pale. The notes are immediately sealed, sent to Rome, classified. For decades, no one knows what they contain. Until 1975, when a Lebanese priest named Father Daher, who had access to the archives, sees the documents. He doesn't have permission to copy them, but he reads them. And years later, shortly before his own death, He tells a journalist what he saw. He says, Charbel described 3 great trials. The first was the massacre of Christians in the East, which began in his own time and would continue. The second was a great falling away within the church, priests losing faith, bishops compromising doctrine, lay people abandoning the sacraments. The third was the most terrifying, a time when the faithful remnant would be so small, so persecuted, that they would think God had abandoned them. But he said this trial would not last forever. He said, after the darkest night comes the brightest dawn. But few will see it, because few will endure. Father Daher dies in 1982. The journalist who interviewed him publishes the account in a small Lebanese Catholic newspaper. Almost no one reads it. But the words are out there now, floating, waiting. And in 2025, as we watch the Christian population of the Middle East collapse, as we watch faith evaporate in the West, as we watch internal divisions tear the church apart, those words don't sound like prophecy anymore. They sound like a news report. The scientific investigations, when skeptics become believers. Let's talk about the people who came to disprove Charbel, because there were many. Dr. Antoine Curie, 1950, a French-educated physician, rationalist, secular. He's hired by the Lebanese government to examine the body and provide a scientific explanation for its preservation. He arrives expecting fraud, embalming, tricks. He finds none. He spends 3 days examining the body, taking samples, running tests. He even brings in a forensic pathologist from Paris. Their conclusion, no known process, natural or artificial, can account for this state of preservation. Dr. Curie writes a personal letter to a colleague. I came as a skeptic. I left, unsettled. I cannot explain what I saw, and that troubles me more than I can express. Professor Henri Joyeux, 2001. A renowned French oncologist and medical researcher. He's asked to review the documented miracles attributed to Charbel for a scientific journal article. He examines 15 cases. In 12 of them, he finds clear medical documentation, before and after scans, pathology reports, physician testimonies. He writes, in at least 8 of these cases, the healing is instantaneous, complete, and has no medical explanation. These are not remissions. These are reversals of irreversible conditions. He's interviewed later, asked if he believes these are miracles. He pauses, then says, I am a man of science, but science has limits. What I saw in those files exceeded those limits. The 1952 chemical analysis, the liquid that shouldn't exist. Samples of the liquid seeping from Charbel's body are sent to laboratories in Rome, Beirut, and Paris. All 3 labs return the same result. The substance contains organic compounds consistent with human tissue, but it shows no signs of bacterial growth, no enzymatic breakdown, no oxidation. One chemist writes, this material is biologically active but not decaying. That should be impossible. Living tissue decays. Dead tissue decays faster. This is neither living nor dead. It exists in a state we cannot define. The Vatican quietly archives the reports. They're never published, but copies leak out over the years, and scientists who see them are baffled. One biologist, writing in an underground Catholic journal in 1978, says, if this data is accurate, we are looking at a phenomenon that violates the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy should be increasing. It's not. Something is preserving this body through a mechanism we don't understand. And then he adds, which means either our understanding of biology is incomplete, or something beyond biology is at work. The plot twist, the prophecy hidden in plain sight. Now here's where everything you just learned connects to something you haven't been told yet. In 1993, the same year Nohad el-Shami was healed, something else happened at Charbel's tomb. A group of Maronite priests from around the world gathered there for a conference on Eastern Catholic spirituality. Among them was a bishop from Iraq, a man named Jacques Ishak, who would later be martyred by ISIS in 2014. During a private prayer vigil at the tomb, Bishop Ishak reported experiencing a vision. He saw Charbel standing before him, dressed not in his monk's habit but in liturgical vestments covered in blood. Charbel spoke to him, not in Arabic, but in Aramaic, the language of Christ. The bishop understood every word. Charbel said, "The blood of the east will cry out to heaven, the altars will be abandoned, the shepherds will flee, but a remnant will remain, and from that remnant, the church will be reborn." Bishop Ishak wrote this down immediately after the vision. He shared it with his fellow priests at the conference. Some dismissed it as emotional exhaustion. Others believed it. But here's the critical detail. Bishop Ishak asked Charbel in the vision, "When will this happen?" And Charbel answered, "When the cedar of Lebanon falls, the purification begins." The cedar of Lebanon, the national symbol, the tree that appears on the Lebanese flag. The tree mentioned in Scripture as a symbol of strength, beauty, and permanence. In 1993, Lebanon was still recovering from its civil war, but it was standing. Barely, but standing. Today, in 2025, Lebanon has collapsed. Economically, politically, spiritually. The Christian population has dropped from 54% in 1950 to less than 30% today. Churches are empty. Young people are fleeing. The cedar has fallen. And the purification, it's not coming. It's here. The question that burns. So let me ask you something. Why does a body that should have turned to dust 127 years ago still produce healing liquid? Why do scientists with no religious agenda admit they can't explain it? Why did a mystic monk from the mountains of Lebanon see exactly what we're living through right now? And why is the Vatican still keeping parts of his prophecies locked away? Because here's what I think. Charbel didn't just predict the crisis. He gave us the way through it. But that way is terrifying. It requires something most people aren't willing to give. Complete surrender. Absolute faith. The willingness to walk through the dark night without guarantees. And most people would rather have comfort than truth. Most people would rather have certainty than faith. But the ones who don't, the ones who are willing to endure what Charbel endured, to trust what Charbel trusted, those are the ones who will see the dawn. And the dawn is coming. But first, we have to survive the night. Vatican Secret Archives, Rome, 1981. A Jesuit historian named Father Antonio Martini is granted rare access to classified documents related to approved Marian apparitions and mystic revelations from the 19th and 20th centuries. He's writing a book on the development of private revelation in Catholic theology. He spends 6 weeks in the archives, reading hundreds of documents. Reports from Lourdes, Fatima, La Salette, testimonies from saints and mystics, letters from bishops describing supernatural events in their dioceses. And slowly, he begins to notice something. A pattern. The same themes appearing again and again, across different countries, different decades, different visionaries who never met each other and couldn't have coordinated their messages. A great apostasy within the church, the abandonment of the Eucharist wars in the East that would threaten Christian civilization. A period of darkness and confusion where truth would be obscured, the persecution of the faithful remnant. And finally, after unimaginable suffering, a period of peace. Father Martini creates a timeline. He maps out the prophecies geographically and chronologically. And what he discovers shakes him to his core. They all point to the same time period. They all converge on the early 21st century. He writes in his private journal, "I came here to study historical curiosities. I am leaving convinced that I am reading a roadmap for the present age. God has been warning us for 150 years, and we have not been listening." Father Martini submits his manuscript to his Jesuit superiors. It is rejected. Too sensational, they say. Too apocalyptic. Not scholarly enough. He dies in 1987. His research is boxed up and returned to the archives. But copies exist, and people have been reading them quietly for decades. And what they reveal is this. Charbel was not alone. Fatima, 1917. The blueprint. Let's start with the most famous one. Fatima, Portugal, May 13, 1917. 3 shepherd children, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, report seeing a beautiful lady dressed in white who appears to them in a field. She tells them she comes from heaven. She asks them to pray the rosary. She promises to return on the 13th of each month until October. The children are interrogated, threatened, mocked, but they don't change their story. On October 13, 1970, 000 people gather at the site. Believers and skeptics alike, journalists, scientists, government officials. And then, at noon, the sun begins to move. It spins. It changes colors. It appears to plunge toward the earth. Thousands scream in terror. Atheists fall to their knees. Even secular newspapers report the phenomenon. But the real message of Fatima wasn't the miracle of the sun. It was the secrets. The lady, identified by the children as the Virgin Mary, gave Lucia 3 secrets, 3 prophecies. The first 2 were eventually revealed: a vision of hell, a warning that World War I would end, but if humanity didn't convert, a worse war would come, World War II. The third secret was written down by Lucia in 1944 and sent to the Vatican in a sealed envelope. It was supposed to be revealed in 1960. Pope John XXIII read it that year, and then he locked it away. It wasn't publicly released until 2000, and when it was, the Vatican said it referred to the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II in 1981. Case closed. Except, many people, including high-ranking clergy, believe the full third secret was never revealed, that what was published in 2000 was only part of it, that the most terrifying section, the part that describes an apostasy within the church hierarchy itself, remains hidden. Cardinal Luigi Ciappi, personal theologian to 5 popes, said in 1995, "The third secret speaks of the great apostasy in the church. It predicts that the smoke of Satan will enter even into the highest levels of the church. It foretells that many will lose the faith." He died shortly after making that statement. The Vatican never commented. But here's what connects Fatima to Charbel. Both speak of a remnant. Both speak of purification through suffering. Both speak of peace that comes only after the crisis reaches its peak. And both place the timeline in our lifetime. Akita, 1973, The Warning from the East. Now let's jump to Japan, October 13, 1973. Notice the date, the same as the Fatima miracle. A Japanese nun named Sister Agnes Sasagawa, who is deaf, is praying before a wooden statue of Mary in a convent chapel in Akita. Suddenly, she hears a voice. Not externally, she's deaf, but internally, clear and unmistakable. The statue is speaking to her. Over the next several weeks, Sister Agnes receives 3 messages. The statue also begins to exhibit supernatural phenomena. It weeps human tears. Blood appears on its hands. Scientists collect the samples. They're genuine human fluids. No natural explanation. The messages Sister Agnes receives are chilling. If men do not repent and better themselves, the Father will inflict a terrible punishment on all humanity. It will be a punishment greater than the flood, such as one will never have seen before. Fire will fall from the sky and will wipe out a great part of humanity. The good as well as the bad, sparing neither priests nor faithful. The survivors will find themselves so desolate that they will envy the dead. Sister Agnes is terrified. She reports this to her bishop, John Shojiro Ito. He's skeptical at first, but then he witnesses the statue weeping. He sees the blood. He brings in scientists, doctors, photographers. Everything checks out. In 1984, Bishop Ito officially approves the apparitions as worthy of belief. This is extremely rare. The Vatican almost never approves contemporary apparitions this quickly. But here's the detail that makes your blood run cold. When Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, was shown the messages from Akita in the 1980s, he reportedly said, "The message of Akita is essentially the same as Fatima. The same warning, the same timeline, the same pattern, but with one additional element. Akita specifically mentions that the crisis will involve clergy and bishops, that the corruption will come from inside the church. that many priests will lose their faith and lead souls astray. And when Sister Agnes asked when this would happen, the voice said, "The work of the devil will infiltrate even into the church in such a way that one will see cardinals opposing cardinals, bishops against bishops." Sound familiar? In 2025, we're watching bishops publicly contradict each other on fundamental doctrines. We're watching cardinals accuse each other of heresy. We're watching entire national bishops' conferences split over issues like blessing same-sex unions, women's ordination, and the nature of marriage. The prophecy isn't future tense anymore. It's present tense. Garabandal, 1961-65, the countdown. Now let's go to Spain. A remote village called Garabandal. 4 young girls report seeing the Virgin Mary over a period of 4 years. The apparitions are dramatic. The girls fall into ecstatic trances, walk backward up rocky hills without stumbling, hold burning candles without being burned. Thousands witness these phenomena. Doctors examine the girls during their ecstasies. They find no fraud, no hallucination, no natural explanation. The messages the girls receive are specific. A great warning will come. A global illumination of conscience where every person will see their sins as God sees them. After the warning, a miracle will occur at Garabandal that will be visible worldwide and leave a permanent sign. If humanity still doesn't convert after the miracle, a chastisement will follow. The girls are told the dates of these events, but forbidden to reveal them publicly until 8 days before they occur. One of the visionaries, Conchita Gonzalez, says, "The warning will happen in my lifetime, and it will be the greatest act of mercy since the Incarnation." She's still alive. She's 75 years old, which means, according to her own testimony, it's coming soon. But here's what connects Garabandal to Charbel and Fatima. The girls were also given a message about the church. They said, "Many priests, bishops, and cardinals are on the road to perdition, and with them they are taking many souls." When asked when this crisis would reach its peak, they said, "At a time when communism will seem to have disappeared, but will still secretly be powerful." In 1965, when this message was given, the Soviet Union was at the height of its power. Everyone thought the statement was nonsense. But look at today. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. Communism, as an official political system, seems dead. But Marxist ideology, repackaged as social justice movements, critical theory, liberation theology, has infiltrated governments, universities, and even seminaries. The prophecy was accurate, just not in the way anyone expected. The Lebanese connection, when Charbel meets Fatima. Now here's where it gets really interesting. In 1920, just 3 years after Fatima, a Lebanese Maronite priest named Father Elias Kerbage reports a vision. He's praying at Charbel's tomb when he sees Charbel appear to him, not as an old man but radiant, transfigured. Charbel tells him, "What was revealed at Fatima is the same message I carried in my heart. The lady who appeared in Portugal carries the same warning I gave to my brothers. The church will be tested. The East will bleed, but the faithful will be saved." Father Kerbage writes this down and sends it to his bishop. The bishop dismisses it as pious imagination. But in 1950, when Charbel's body is found incorrupt, Father Kerbage's testimony resurfaces. People begin to pay attention, and then something stunning happens. In 2000, when Pope John Paul II visits Lebanon, he makes a special pilgrimage to Charbel's tomb. It's not part of the official schedule. It's a personal devotion. He spends 20 minutes alone in the chapel, kneeling before the relics. When he comes out, witnesses say his face is wet with tears. A journalist asks him what he prayed for. He says, "I prayed for the church in the East, and I asked Saint Charbel to intercede for us in the trial that is coming." The trial that is coming, not the trial that might come, not if there is a trial, the trial that is coming. He knew. 2025, the convergence point. Now let's connect all the dots. We are in 2025. The Christian population of the Middle East has collapsed from 20% in 1900 to less than 4% today. Churches that stood for 500 years have been demolished by ISIS, abandoned, or converted to mosques in the West, church attendance has plummeted. In some European countries, less than 5% attend weekly Mass. Priests are leaving the ministry in record numbers. Bishops are publicly contradicting each other on fundamental doctrines. Scandals have decimated trust in church leadership, and a whole generation has been raised with no knowledge of the faith. This isn't speculation, this is data. And every single one of these crises was predicted. Not by conspiracy theorists, not by doomsayers, but by saints and mystics whose credibility has been verified by miracles, by incorrupt bodies, by healings that science cannot explain. Charbel said, "The East will bleed. It's bleeding." Fatima said, "Many will lose the faith." They have. Akita said, "Cardinals will oppose cardinals." They are. Garabandal said, "Many priests are on the road to perdition." The numbers don't lie. This isn't coincidence. This is convergence. The global signs, when heaven screams. But it's not just prophecies. There are physical signs too. In 2020, during the COVID lockdowns, something unprecedented happened. Churches around the world closed. For the first time in history, Catholics were forbidden to attend Mass, not by persecutors, but by their own bishops. The Eucharist, the source and summit of Catholic faith, became inaccessible to millions. Charbel prophesied, "The altar will be abandoned." It was, by force. In 2023, wars erupted across the Middle East again. Israel and Gaza, Syria, Lebanon teetering on the brink of total collapse. Iran threatening regional war. Charbel prophesied, "The East will burn." It is. In 2024, Pope Francis authorized blessings for same-sex couples, causing a firestorm of controversy. Bishops in Africa and Eastern Europe openly rejected the directive. Cardinals accused each other of heresy in public letters. Akita prophesied, "Cardinals opposing cardinals." Happening, right now. And then there are the astronomical signs. In April 2024, a total solar eclipse crossed North America, passing directly over 7 towns all named Nineveh, the biblical city known for its repentance before judgment. Coincidence? Maybe. But then, in October 2024, a comet named Suchinshan Atlas appeared, the brightest comet visible from Earth in 27 years. Ancient cultures always interpreted comets as omens of great change. And on December 8, 2024, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris reopened after 5 years of restoration following the catastrophic fire of 2019. The symbolism is staggering. The church burned and broken, rising again, but not yet fully restored, still under construction, still fragile, the terrifying question. So here's what I need you to understand. These prophecies aren't vague. They're specific. They're not symbolic. They're literal. And they're not for some distant future. They're for now. Charbel, Fatima, Akita, Garabandal, they all describe the same crisis. They all describe the same purification. They all describe the same promise, a new era of peace. But they also all say the same thing about who will see it: only the remnant, only those who endure the dark night, only those who refuse to abandon the faith when everything around them collapses. And that remnant is being tested right now. If this is making your heart race, if something inside you is waking up, subscribe now, because what I'm about to reveal in the final chapter will change how you see everything that's happening in 2025. Because there's one more secret, one more piece of the puzzle, and it's hidden in the way Charbel died. December 16, 1898, Hermitage of Saints Peter and Paul, Anaya, Lebanon. It's late afternoon. The sun is setting over the mountains, casting long shadows across the snow-covered peaks. Inside the small stone chapel, Father Charbel Makhlouf is preparing to celebrate Mass. He's 70 years old. His body is worn from decades of fasting, manual labor, and extreme penance. His hands shake as he puts on the vestments. Other monks have noticed he's been weaker lately, slower, but he refuses to rest. He begins the Mass, The Latin prayers flow from his lips in a whisper. He elevates the host, he consecrates the wine, and then, just as he's about to consume the Eucharist, it happens. He freezes. His body goes rigid. His face turns pale. He tries to lower the chalice, but his hands won't obey. The cup trembles. Wine spills onto the altar cloth. Father Makarios, assisting him, rushes forward. He catches Charbel as he collapses. Charbel has suffered a massive stroke. Right there, at the altar, in the presence of the Eucharist. They carry him back to his cell. He's paralyzed, unable to speak, unable to move. But his eyes are open, and witnesses say they've never seen such peace in a human face. For 8 days, he lingers between life and death. He doesn't eat, doesn't drink, just breathes, slowly, steadily. And then, on December 24th, Christmas Eve, at the exact moment when the monastery bells ring for midnight mass, he takes his last breath. The monks weep. They prepare his body for burial. They dress him in his worn habit. They place him in a simple wooden coffin. But before they close the lid, Father Makarios leans down and whispers something to the body. Years later, on his own deathbed, he reveals what he said. "You died where you belonged, at the altar, with Christ. Now finish the work he gave you." What work? For over a century, no one understood. But now, in 2025, the answer is becoming clear. The altar, the key to everything. Let me take you back to something most people overlook. Charbel spent 23 years as a hermit. 23 years in almost complete solitude. But every single day without fail, he celebrated Mass. Not in a grand cathedral, not before crowds. In a tiny chapel barely large enough for 2 people. Often he celebrated alone. Just him and God. Why? Because for Charbel, the Eucharist wasn't a ritual. It was reality. The most real thing in existence. He believed, and with every fiber of his being, that when he spoke the words of consecration, bread and wine ceased to exist and became the actual body and blood of Christ. Not a symbol, not a metaphor, Christ himself. And that belief shaped everything about him. His fasting, preparation for receiving the Eucharist, his silence, adoration of the Eucharist, his suffering, union with Christ's suffering made present in the Eucharist. One of the monks who lived with him wrote, "Father Charbel would weep during the consecration, every single time, as if he were standing at the foot of the cross, watching Christ die." He said once, "If people truly understood what happens at Mass, they would die of love." And Charbel almost did, repeatedly. There are accounts of him collapsing after Mass, overwhelmed by spiritual ecstasy, of him being found unconscious in the chapel, his face radiant, of him experiencing what mystics call transverberation, a spiritual piercing of the heart so intense it causes physical pain. He lived for the Eucharist. And when the time came to die, he died at the Eucharist. Not accidentally, intentionally, because his death was a prophecy. The prophecy hidden in his death. Here's what most people miss. Charbel's stroke happened at the exact moment of consecration. The moment when the priest speaks the words, "This is my body. This is my blood." The moment when heaven touches earth. And then he spent 8 days paralyzed, unable to move, unable to speak, but fully conscious. 8 days. In biblical numerology, 8 is the number of new beginnings. The 8th day is the day after the 7th, the day after the Sabbath rest. It's the day of resurrection, the day when Christ rose from the dead and began the new creation. Charbel died on the 8th day, on Christmas Eve, the night when Christ entered the world. The symbolism is overwhelming, but here's the part that will break your heart. During those 8 days, Charbel couldn't receive communion. His throat was paralyzed. He couldn't swallow. The one thing he lived for, union with Christ in the Eucharist, was physically impossible. He experienced what he had prophesied. The altar will be abandoned. He experienced it in his own body, in his own death. He became the prophecy, And the message is this: there will come a time when the faithful will be cut off from the Eucharist, not by choice, but by force, by circumstance, by persecution. And in that time, they must continue to live as Charbel lived, in complete trust, complete surrender, complete faith that God has not abandoned them, even when they cannot feel His presence, even when they cannot receive the sacraments, even when everything that sustained their faith seems to have been taken away. That's the dark night, and Charbel is showing us how to survive it. 2020, when the prophecy became reality. Let's talk about something painful. March 2020, COVID-19 pandemic. Governments around the world issue lockdown orders. And then something unthinkable happens. Churches close. Catholic bishops, not hostile governments, not persecutors, but bishops, forbid the faithful from attending Mass. The sacraments become inaccessible. Priests celebrate Mass alone, behind closed doors, streaming it on computers to people trapped in their homes. For months, millions of Catholics could not receive the Eucharist. Weddings were canceled. Funerals were limited to 10 people. The sick died without last rites. Children couldn't receive First Communion. Elderly Catholics who had attended Mass every day for decades watched from their couches as priests held up the host on a screen, so close, yet impossibly far. It was exactly what Charbel experienced in his final days. The desire for the Eucharist, the inability to receive it, the spiritual agony of separation. Some people said it's just temporary, it's for safety, it's prudent. But others saw it differently. They saw it as a test. Because here's the question no one wanted to ask. If the church can be closed for a virus, what else can close it? A war? An economic collapse? A government decree? A new wave of persecution? And if we so easily accepted the closure once, will we accept it again? Charbel's prophecy wasn't about a virus. It was about the normalization of abandoning the altar. And once it's been normalized, it's much easier to repeat. The Vatican's silence, what they won't say. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Why hasn't the Vatican officially promoted Charbel's prophecies? He's a canonized saint. His miracles are verified. His incorrupt body is scientific fact. His predictions have proven accurate. So why the silence? Because Charbel's message is uncomfortable. It doesn't fit the narrative of progress, dialogue, and accommodation that has dominated the Church since the 1960s. Charbel's message is ancient, uncompromising. It demands holiness, sacrifice, and separation from the world. It warns of judgment. It calls sin by its name. It insists that there is only one way to salvation, through Christ, through the cross, through the Eucharist. That message doesn't play well in an age that values tolerance above truth. So the Vatican acknowledges Charbel as a saint. They allow pilgrims to visit his tomb. They don't suppress his story. But they don't amplify it either. They let him remain a regional devotion, a Lebanese thing, a curiosity for mystics and traditionalists, but not a prophet for the universal church. Except here's the problem. You can't suppress truth forever. And when the crisis Charbel predicted becomes undeniable, people will start asking, why didn't you warn us? And the answer will be, we did. Through the saints, through the mystics, through the signs. You just weren't listening. The miracle of 1950. The sign we ignored. Let me take you back to 1950, the first exhumation of Charbel's body. When they open the tomb and find him incorrupt, the liquid seeping from his body, the fragrance filling the air. They know immediately this is supernatural. But here's what's often overlooked. The exhumation happens in April 1950, and in November 1950, Pope Pius V solemnly defines the dogma of the Assumption of Mary, that Mary, at the end of her earthly life, was taken body and soul into heaven. Two events, 6 months apart. Mary's body didn't decay. Charbel's body didn't decay. Mary was assumed into heaven. Charbel's body produces liquid that heals, as if heaven itself is flowing through him. The connection is undeniable. Charbel's incorruption is a sign pointing to the Assumption, and the Assumption is a sign pointing to the resurrection of the body, the ultimate promise of Christianity. But it's also a warning. Mary's Assumption happened because she was immaculate, sinless, completely united to Christ. Charbel's incorruption happened because he imitated that union through radical holiness. The message is clear. Only those who are united to Christ, in life, in death, in suffering, will experience the resurrection. Everyone else will decay, spiritually, eternally, and the choice is ours. The final plot twist, the date no one noticed. Now I'm going to tell you something that will tie everything together. Remember Nohad El-Shami, the woman healed of cancer in 1993? Remember the date of her miracle? January 22nd, 1993. Now let me tell you what else happened on January 22nd. On January 22, 1973, exactly 20 years before Nohad's healing, the United States Supreme Court legalized abortion nationwide in the Roe v. Wade decision. That decision led to the deaths of over 60 million unborn children in America alone. Worldwide, the number is over 1.5 billion, the greatest silent holocaust in human history, and Charbel, through Nohad's healing, sent a message on the anniversary of that decision. Life will triumph over death. But not without a fight, not without suffering, not without a remnant who refuses to participate in the culture of death. Nohad was healed of cancer, the disease of cells that grow uncontrollably, consuming the body from within. Abortion is the cancer of civilization, the destruction of life at its most vulnerable, consuming society from within. Charbel's miracle was a sign. Just as I healed this woman's body, I can heal the world, but only if you believe, only if you trust, only if you fight. And the fight is here, now, in 2025. Because on June 24, 2022, almost 50 years after Roe, the Supreme Court overturned the decision. The culture of death suffered its first major defeat. But the battle isn't over. It's intensifying. And Charbel's prophecy is still unfolding. The resurrection promise, what comes after the night. So let's talk about hope. Because everything I've told you sounds terrifying. And it should. We're living through the crisis Charbel predicted. The apostasy, the wars, the abandonment of the altar, the testing of faith. It's real, it's happening, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. But here's what you need to understand. Charbel didn't just prophesy destruction, he prophesied resurrection. He said, "After the darkest night comes the brightest dawn," and his own body is proof of that promise. He died. He was buried. He should have decayed, but he didn't. He rose, not in the way Christ rose, but in a way that points to Christ's resurrection. His body became a sign of the indestructibility of grace, a sign that death doesn't have the final word, and that's the promise for us. If we remain faithful, if we endure the dark night, if we refuse to abandon the altar even when we can't physically access it, if we hold on to Christ with the same desperation Charbel did, then we will see the dawn. But it requires something most people aren't willing to give. Total trust. Not trust that God will make everything comfortable. Not trust that we'll avoid suffering. But trust that God is with us in the suffering. That He hasn't abandoned us, that the darkness is not the end. Charbel spent 8 days paralyzed, unable to receive the Eucharist, but still trusting. We're being asked to do the same. And if we do, we'll see what Charbel saw, the resurrection. The call on what you must do now. So here's what I need you to hear. This isn't just a story about a dead saint from Lebanon. This is a roadmap for your life. Right now, in 2025. You're watching the church fracture. You're watching faith evaporate. You're watching the world descend into chaos. And you're wondering, is this the end? No. This is the purification. This is the dark night. And you're being called to be part of the remnant, not because you're special, not because you're perfect, but because you're willing. Willing to trust when trust seems insane. Willing to hope when hope seems impossible. willing to love when love costs everything. Charbel's prophecy isn't about predicting the future, it's about preparing you for it. And the preparation is simple. Stay at the altar, physically, when you can, spiritually, when you can't. Receive the Eucharist as if your life depends on it, because it does. Pray the Rosary as if it's a weapon, because it is. Fast, sacrifice, give, serve. Not to earn salvation, Christ already gave you that, but to become strong enough to endure what's coming, because the dawn is coming. But first we have to survive the night, and Charbel is showing us how. The final revelation, why it had to be him. One last thing. Why Charbel? Why a Lebanese hermit monk that most of the world has never heard of? Because God always chooses the small, the hidden, the forgotten. David was a shepherd boy, Mary was a peasant girl, the apostles were fishermen, and Charbel was a mountain monk who chose obscurity. Because the message of the gospel has never been about power, prestige, or popularity. It's about hiddenness. It's about dying to self so completely that only Christ remains. And that's the message we've forgotten. We want a church that's influential, respected, culturally relevant, but Christ wants a church that's holy. And holiness is always hidden, always suffering, always crucified, until the resurrection. Charbel lived that, he died that, and now his incorrupt body, still producing miracles, still healing the sick, still defying decay, is proof that it works. The way of the cross leads to resurrection, not around suffering, through it, not avoiding the dark night, embracing it, not escaping the trial, enduring it. And when you do, you'll see what Charbel saw. You'll see God. Closing, the invitation. So I'm going to ask you one final question. Are you ready? Ready to be part of the remnant? Ready to hold on to faith when everyone around you lets go? Ready to stay at the altar when the altar is abandoned? Because that's what Charbel is asking of you. Not perfection, not heroism, just faithfulness. The same faithfulness he showed, the same faithfulness Mary showed, the same faithfulness every saint showed. And if you do, I promise you this: you will see the dawn. You will see the peace that comes after the storm. You will see the new creation that God is preparing. But only if you don't give up. Only if you remember that the darkest night is just before sunrise. If this story moved your heart, if something inside you is burning, subscribe, leave a like, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because right now, in 2025, there are people drowning in despair who need to be reminded that God hasn't abandoned them. That the prophecies are real, that the saints are interceding, and that the dawn is coming. Charbel is praying for you, right now, from heaven. And his prayer is the same prayer he prayed every day of his life. Lord, give them the strength to endure. Give them the faith to believe. Give them the love to persevere. And when the night is over, bring them home. Amen.